Joy had to wear a white plastic mask just to be seen by the AI. Just pause on that for a second. The technology of the future literally didn't see her until she became less herself. I remember watching Back to the Future when I was a kid, completely mesmerized by the idea that someone could hop into a DeLorean, hit 88 miles an hour, and blast into another time. Another time? I was captivated, wide-eyed, legs crossed on the living room floor, leaning in as Marty McFly skateboarded his way through time, dodging paradoxes and reshaping destiny. The flying cars, the talking holograms, the hoverboards, they weren't just cool to me, they were possibilities. They were portals. And somewhere in the back of my young mind, I was already asking the big questions. What would the future look like? Who would be there? Would I be there? And I dreamt of that future. And yes, the gadgets and gizmos amazed me. The holograms, video phones, robots, my little mind was essentially blown. But beyond what then was unheard of technology, there was the freedom embedded in time travel itself. The ability to imagine yourself beyond your current circumstances, beyond now. And oh my God, I couldn't wait for that future. But as I grew older, something shifted. That same excitement I had started to come with a quiet ache. Because even as sci-fi worlds expanded across galaxies, even as fiction allowed creators to invent entirely new realities from scratch, Black people were still a passing thought found in those futures. Even in utopia, in a perfect society imagined by creators of fantastical fiction, we were missing, or worse, barely present. Even in their wildest dreams, we are erased. And let me tell you, realizing that hits different when you're a kid already learning to be invisible in history books. When you're a little Black girl who's taught that survival is realism and imagination is luxury. But I never let that go. I kept watching, I kept reading, I kept dreaming. And somewhere along the way, I realized that the absence wasn't a flaw in me. It wasn't a flaw in our people. It was a flaw in the system, a flaw in the lens, a flaw in the imagination of a world that couldn't see Blackness as futuristic, as visionary, as central to what comes next. But I'm here to tell you now, the future is Black. It's always been. Every time we've reimagined survival as joy, every time we've turned pain into poetry, every time we've coded culture into systems that were never built with us in mind, we've been building the future. Welcome to Futures in Black. I'm your host, Kasheia, an AI strategist, educator, and longtime lover of science, technology, and sci-fi. And this show, it's about reclaiming our place in the future. Actually, no, scratch that. It's about reprogramming the very idea of what the future is when Black imagination leads. Because we're not just participants in someone else's story. We're the architects of a whole new world. And that work starts right now. Let's get grounded in some definitions. As we discuss Black futures and imagine what it looks, feels, and sounds like to center Black thought, Black art, and Black systems, we have to understand that this isn't new. There are long-standing frameworks that guide this work. In fact, these frameworks are foundational to this podcast, to Futures in Black. They've been shaped by generations of thinkers, artists, scientists, philosophers, and organizers. People who dare to dream beyond colonial timelines and capitalist constraints. Some of these terms might be familiar to you, or maybe they're completely new. Either way, that's exactly why this podcast exists, to build a shared language of possibility. Because understanding the language of liberation is the first step to speaking new futures into existence. Black Futurism is a broad umbrella. It's a political, philosophical, and cultural movement that asks, what does the future look like when Black people are not just included or allowed or accommodated, but centered as creators, as leaders, and as visionaries? What happens when we shift from being reactive to being generative? It includes real-world planning for Black futures, economic models, tech ethics, community government, food sovereignty, and environmental justice, and the cultural storytelling that breathes life into it all. It connects policy with poetry, data with dreaming. Under that scope are two more specific ideologies. Afrofuturism, a term coined by Mark Derry in 1993 in an essay titled Black to the Future, the inspiration for the title of this podcast episode, focuses more on the creative and speculative arts. It blends science fiction, history, and Black diasporic culture to imagine new worlds. Think music, art, literature, from Sun Ra's interstellar jazz to Octavia Butler's prophetic novels. It's about Black agency, identity, and freedom through a cultural lens of creative work and activism. African futurism is a genre rooted specifically in African perspectives, not centering the West. Think about all the glory, innovation, and spiritual depth that is Wakanda in Black Panther. It's a framework that centers African wisdom, systems, science, language, and cosmologies, unfiltered and fully realized. Both of these perspectives ask the same essential question. What does the future look like when Black people worldwide are the protagonists of our own stories? You'll hear me highlight both diasporic and continental visions on this show, because both are necessary. Our liberation is local and global. But here's the point. None of this is just aesthetic. These aren't just vibes. These are survival strategies, liberation logic in action. Black Futurism says we are not stuck in history. We are not defined by trauma. And we are not waiting for permission to imagine and build what comes next. I don't want you to take away and think that Black futurism is some pie in the sky, imagination only idea, because it is so much more. And it's the essence of everything we'll discuss on this show. It's real world planning, real world resistance, real world redesign, now for the future. Black futurism is grounded in both hope and urgency. Racism, economic inequality, and tech bias are historical and present threats to our identities and our agency. But still, we must imagine and create better outcomes for ourselves, because no one is coming to save us. And no one is going to hand us the keys. We've always had to fight for what we have, but we've also always had to imagine it first. Building a future where Black people are truly free begins with dreams, imagination, and deep discussion. Then it transforms into tactical strategy, intergenerational design, and soulful innovation. This movement isn't confined to academia or art galleries. It shows up in our everyday lives. Whether it's community-led tech innovation in Detroit, Black-owned farms using blockchain to track equitable food distribution, or storytelling workshops in New Orleans blending folklore with AI tools, Afrofuturist practice is living, breathing, and building. And it's not just artists or organizers. It's parents building radical libraries at home. It's teachers rewriting curriculum. It's developers building ethical AI models with justice at the core. All of this is futures in Black. So I'll ask again, what kind of future are we building? And who's dreaming it into being? Let me take you into a real world example. In 2018, MIT researcher Joy Buolamwini conducted a groundbreaking study that revealed significant racial and gender biases in facial recognition software that is used by major tech companies. The study found that these systems had an error rate of up to almost 35% for dark-skinned women, compared to less than 1% for light-skinned men. Now, get this. Joy had to wear a white plastic mask to be seen by the AI. Just pause on that for a moment. The technology of the future literally didn't see her until she became less herself. Y'all, that's not a glitch. That's a pattern, a system of erasure. It's what she calls the coded gaze, the embedded biases within AI systems that reflect the prejudices of their creators and the data they are trained on. Even the most famous Black women, Oprah Winfrey, Michelle Obama, Serena Williams, were unrecognized. That ain't a software bug. That's a core reflection of systems, their systems. And this is why Black futurism matters. Because if we're not designing the future, we're at the mercy of someone else's imagination. And their imagination very often doesn't include us. Joy's research highlighted that racial biases are baked into the most advanced tech. Technology reflects the society that creates it. And society has always tried to erase us. So the tech does too. That's dangerous, especially when this tech is used in policing, hiring, advertising, or medicine, all filtered through racism and sexism. So, just what did our good sis Joy do? She founded the Algorithmic Justice League, or AJL. She created art, she wrote code, she lobbied for policy change, and took the conversation global. She also launched the Safe Face Pledge in 2018 to prevent facial recognition abuse. Unfortunately, it was retired in 2021 due to lack of commitment from some of the same companies building the tech, of course. Let that sink in, right? We are not and have never been their priority. That's why we must center ourselves. But the AJL is still very much active. Joy Buolamwini is Afrofuturism in action. Her work serves as a powerful reminder that we must be vigilant and proactive in ensuring that the technologies shaping our future are inclusive and equitable for us. By challenging the status quo and advocating for ethical AI, Joy exemplifies the transformative potential of Black futurism. But what's just as powerful is how she frames the issue, not as a tech problem, but as a justice problem. Joy isn't merely asking for software updates. She's demanding a cultural shift, one where algorithmic accountability is not optional, one where the people most impacted by bias systems are empowered to shape the tools of tomorrow. That's a revolutionary idea in a world where data is often harvested from Black communities without consent, used to surveil us, profit from us, and control us, while we're left out of the rooms where decisions are made. In 2023, Joy released a memoir and manifesto entitled Unmasking AI, where she dives even deeper into the personal and political stakes of algorithmic injustice. In it, she describes her journey from researcher to reluctant activist and explains how poetry, performance, and code became her weapons in the fight for algorithmic justice. She reminds us that science and spirit are not opposites, that artistic expression can be a vehicle for technological reform. Joy's story makes it clear. The future we're coding now will define who gets seen, who gets heard, and protected tomorrow. If Black voices aren't at the center of that equation, then we're not talking about progress. We're talking about replication of oppression. Imagine a child in Memphis logs into school in the year 2045. But instead of a standard curriculum written without her in mind, she's greeted by a holographic griot. Part teacher, part cultural archive, who not only teaches the facts but affirms her identity while doing it. This griot recognizes AAVE not as a broken English, but as a legitimate diasporic dialect, rich with history, rhythm, and resistance. She learns about the Harlem Renaissance through the words of Toni Morrison, the music of Sun Ra, and the activism of Ida B. Wells, all woven into an immersive, culturally rooted experience that treats her history as central, not supplementary. Now, imagine that same child grows into a young woman and needs support for her mental health. She finds it in digital therapists, powered by AI, yes, but also trained in Black liberatory psychology. This AI knows the weight of generational trauma. It understands the sacredness of silence and the urgency of voice. It doesn't diagnose from a place of pathologizing. It listens, reflects, and helps her heal with the wisdom of both neuroscience and ancestral memory. What if medicine evolved too? What if our doctors study not only just anatomy, but epigenetics and spirit, designing nanobots specifically tailored to address the physiological impacts of systemic racism? Imagine healthcare that doesn't just treat our symptoms, but honors our stories, that doesn't just extend life, but restores dignity. And what if this entire ecosystem of care and creativity wasn't isolated? What if community tech hubs in Detroit, Charlotte, and Dallas were networked, not as startup incubators chasing venture capital, but as sanctuaries for innovation rooted in care? Spaces where youth and elders collaborated on solving local problems, blending Afro-Indigenous ecological wisdom with cutting-edge technology. These hubs wouldn't be profit-driven, they'd be powered by vision, community, and a shared commitment to collective thriving. That's not just wishful thinking, that's vision work. And this is where we do that work, right here, right now, with imagination as our blueprint and justice as our compass. Because before we build it, we have to see it. And Black Futurism gives us the lens to see it clearly. I mentioned earlier in the episode that I've always been a huge fan of science fiction. Shows like Star Trek lit up my imagination with warp speed engines, alien diplomacy, and quantum mechanics. I used to be glued to the screen, fascinated by the way the future was envisioned, limitless, interstellar, technologically utopian. But it always struck me, even back then, that something was not quite right. Even in a distant future where humanity supposedly evolved beyond prejudice and Earth was one peaceful planet among many, there were still more aliens on the screen than there were Black people. White folks were flying the ships, saving galaxies, and writing the future, and we were background noise, if we were there at all. That absence wasn't just frustrating, it was disorienting. How could a genre built entirely on imagination still not imagine us? So when I discovered the work of Octavia E. Butler, it hit me in a way I didn't expect. It was emotional. Her stories didn't just include us, they centered us. Her protagonists were Black women with deep complexity. Her worlds were challenging, layered, and uncannily prophetic. In her parable series, Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, Butler foresaw climate collapse, rising fascism, widespread displacement, and the slow unraveling of American democracy. And this was back in the 90s. One of her characters even ran for president using the campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." I mean, Octavia knew. She was tuned into the frequencies of power, pain, and possibility. Butler also created Earthseed, a fictional religion based on the idea that God is change. That concept alone was revolutionary. It reframed power as adaptability, not domination, It suggested that survival wasn't just about endurance, but about evolution, internal, communal, and spiritual. It gave language to the shifting terrain we live in and offered a toolkit for what's to come. She once wrote, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you." That quote is etched into the hearts of so many of us who see ourselves as builders of something new. Because Butler didn't write escapist fantasies, she wrote blueprints. Her fiction wasn't designed to distract us from this world, it was an invitation to co create the next one. A future not built on systems that were never meant for us to thrive in, but one born from the raw material of our collective imagination, our cultural memory, and refusal to disappear. That's what storytelling does. It's not just entertainment, it's architecture, it's future design. And speaking of future design, I want to talk about another group doing this work in a completely different but equally brilliant way. Black Quantum Futurism, or BQF, is a Philadelphia-based collective founded by Rashida Phillips and Kame Ayewa, who also performs as the experimental musician Moor Mother. Their work is harder to define because it's intentionally boundary breaking. It lives at the intersection of quantum physics, African time philosophies, speculative fiction, and oral storytelling. One of their core projects is the Community Futures Lab. In a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood of North Philly, they created a space for Black residents to record oral histories, envision new timelines, and archive their futures as an act of resistance. This wasn't about nostalgia. It was about agency, about claiming time, not as something linear that leaves us behind, but as something fluid that we can bend, remix, and reclaim. BQF draws inspiration from African cosmologies, where time is cyclical, ancestral, and sacred. They also engage with theoretical physics, like Einstein's theory of relativity and the block universe model, which posits that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. For BQF, this isn't just science, it's strategy. It's about teaching Black communities that we are not locked out of futurity, nor are we forever trapped in the trauma of the past. In 2018, they took their work global through an arts residency at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research in Switzerland. That's the home of the Large Hadron Collider, the world's most powerful particle accelerator. There, they created installations that explore time, memory, and Black existence as quantum phenomena. Beautiful, right? A Black, femme-led collective brought African diasporic time theory to the heart of Western science and said, we belong here too. That's what Black futurism does. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait to be included. It creates new systems, new vocabularies, and new cosmologies altogether. It's not far off or fanciful. It's practical, spiritual, and strategic. And it's ours. Ours to imagine, ours to build, ours to protect. So here are a couple of takeaways from today's show. The first of many, the first of a movement. Let this be your spark, your invitation, your portal into the work of reimagining. Black futurism is both strategy and story. It's where imagination meets action. It asks us not only to dream, but to design, to craft futures where we don't just exist, but where we thrive. And imagination, that's not a luxury. It's a survival skill. It's how we get free. As Adrienne Marie Brown reminds us, all organizing is science fiction. That means anytime we gather to build a world that doesn't exist yet, where justice is real, where communities are whole, we're writing speculative futures. We're saying the status quo isn't inevitable. And here's the thing. Systems like AI, education, finance, and healthcare are already shaping the future right now. Algorithms are making decisions about who gets hired, who gets housing, who gets help. If we're not actively involved in designing these systems, we're consenting to futures built without us in mind. We can't let exclusion repeat itself. But the good news, we already have the tools, our culture, our history, our spirit, and our creativity. That's our technology. That's our blueprint. So what can you do right now? Well, you can follow organizations like Black Futures Lab, Black in AI, and the Black Speculative Arts Movement. You can start a future journal. Dream in long timelines. Envision a world that centers Black wellness, Black brilliance, and Black joy. And pay attention to where Blackness is missing in tomorrow's blueprints. Then boldly step in and fill that space. Here's your mindset shift for today. You don't have to wait for the future. You're already living inside someone else's version of it. The question is, do you want to rewrite it, or better yet, remix it? So why do we need a new vision now? Because the future isn't neutral. It's not some blank canvas waiting to be filled. It's being shaped every single day by policy, by algorithms, by infrastructure, by media narratives, by cultural assumptions, and by decisions made in rooms we aren't always invited to. By people who often do not share our values, our histories, or our needs. The future is being built around us, sometimes without us, and too often against us. But see, they may not be imagining us, but we've always imagined beyond them. We've always dreamed beyond the now. We had to. Survival required it. Liberation demanded it. Whether it was Harriet Tubman charting starlit maps to freedom, or Octavia Butler building entire universes from the margins, Black people have always used imagination as a tool for resistance and recreation. Futures in Black is just the mic for that. This podcast is a platform for radical vision, for ancestral memory, for speculative strategy, and for unapologetic dreaming. It's where we lay claim to the timelines no one thought we belonged in, and then build them ourselves. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And I don't mean that as a slogan slapped on a t-shirt worn outside slave quarters after getting your doctorate. I mean it as a mandate, a call to action, an inheritance we are still unfolding. Because we are not here to be symbolic. We are here to be strategic. What dreams will you seed for those who come next? What systems will you question? What stories will you rewrite? Well, that's all I have for you today. Be sure to follow the Futures in Black podcast and share this episode far and wide with anyone who's ready to dream and build with us. If you have a vision, idea, or future you're carrying, submit it at futuresinblack.com/ask. This has been Futures in Black. where the visions are bold, the voices are black, and the permission is not needed.